Greetings, dear friends, guests, and subscribers to the channel of Alexander Shelest and Alexey Arestovich. This is our live stream, the last for the 2025 timeframe. Alexey, hello. Hello. Friends, first of all, thank you very much for staying with us during 2025. It was a very complicated year, very emotional, very filled with events. We are totally appreciative of you sticking with us and those who come to watch our live streams, those who watch us later, those who come and ask questions. And by the way, same things to the audience of the Privateer station. Appreciate you guys sticking around and keeping an eye on what's happening in Ukraine from this perspective, as it is somewhat different from the official rhetoric coming from Russia and Ukraine. All right, so there are also Telegram channels where you can follow our speakers, Alexander Shelest, Alexey Arestovich. I'm sure a Russian-speaking audience already is aware of them. Unfortunately, this is not available in English, so somewhat limited there. And as always, you can see two QR codes, one next to Alexander Shelest. That's the way to support his channel. And the QR code next to Alexey Arestovich leads to his school of thought. By the way, big thanks to all of you guys who supported our channel with your thanks, with your super donations. We're really appreciative of that. Thank you and Happy New Year. Okay, so going to the stream again. Today question is vote for I am for peace and Ukraine withdrawal from Donbass. Second, I am against peace and against withdrawing from Donbass. And I'm against peace, but I'm for withdrawal from that to just save the army. So don't look for some trap here, just withdraw to save and preserve your troops. Zelenskyy today was talking like, where are we going to leave Donbass from? It's just a plain field there or until the next township. So we can start with political events, Alexey. We can perhaps analyze what happened in Mar-a-Lago during Zelenskyy's visit, because the next day, during the second tag between Putin and Trump, there was more information coming from Lavrov. Ushakov later confirmed or talked about that too, that residence of Putin was shot up. Zelenskyy jumps in and says, no, we didn't shoot at anything. But Trump and Netanyahu confirmed that he heard about it and was very upset. So with these details, it's rather interesting. How do you think this yesterday's conversation will reflect on things? And maybe we can understand better, what did Zelenskyy and Trump talk about? What do you think? As always, let's calculate the options. First of all, Trump did not confirm the attack on Putin's residence during Netanyahu meeting. He said that Putin told him about that. Oh, Alexei, I mean, he said that he was angry by that. Right, but he said that Putin told me that he was attacked, his residence was attacked, and that it is bad. He said, I would have been very upset if my residence was attacked. So, what versions do we have here? First, Ukraine really attacked the residence, right? Then it's very straightforward. This is very blunt 121% signal that Zelenskyy is playing against Trump. One needs to understand that if this is true, Zelenskyy is playing not against the peace deal, not against Putin, not prolonging the war. This is all kindergarten options, secondary, tertiary reasons. The main thing, he's playing against Trump, because the main hit he can orchestrate against Trump is to present him as a failed peacekeeper. And that's the easiest way to disrupt his peacekeeping effort. Now, let's imagine this is wrong. Let's imagine Putin lied and Lavrov lied. And Trump can give order to his investigative services to get the data. Then his services comes back and say, imagine there was no hit. That means that Putin is now in a weak position where Trump can come back to him and ask, hey, Vlad, why are you presenting yourself in such an awful light? Because we can acquire real information. And consider it as my poll to our viewers. Which option do you think is more real? Well, it's, I guess, whom do you believe more, right? Okay, let's listen to what the evil taxi drivers in New York are saying, or DC. Attention to those guys who will be cutting it in pieces and taking snippets and saying that I'm the Russian agent or some other agent. Me, Alexey Arestovich. Today, I don't know whether the attack on residents actually occurred, but I know what the so-called taxi drivers I communicate with of the West are talking about. And this was recorded, and by the way, on the Note from Privateer station at the end of 25, 30, 31st. So, first, this was not just a residence that was attacked, and taxi drivers are saying that it actually was hit. It was also a special command center dedicated to managing Russian military in case of nuclear war. So this is a special project, a whole underground city with things above the ground, communications underneath the ground, and rooms underneath the ground. So supposedly, indeed, there were some UAV drones heading this way. They did not reach the target, but the attack indeed happened. Why Russians are so upset is that because this was an attack against the command center of the nuclear triad that is designed to be an operative center during a huge warfare, if that happens ever. So this is technically an attack on the nuclear doctrine of Russia. And for any country that has nukes, it actually allows them to use nukes back. So imagine you are an officer on duty in that special facility, and there is an attack happening against this facility. They may not be fully aware of what's happening, right? Maybe UAVs with nuclear warheads. What could a normal country do? Not specifically taking Russia, China, or US. The country would probably lift the finger and position it right above the red button and makes a few phone calls to check what the heck is going on. Because the question is whether to press the button or not to press the button. And I, of course, do not believe these evil taxi drivers who are saying and shaming our beautiful Ukrainian president. Sarcasm here. But it's the 31st, right? We can fantasize a little bit. If it is true, then this fantastical and hard to believe event, again, sarcasm here, is or can be characterized as the most large-scale provocation since, I don't know, Caribbean crisis probably. The attack on the strategic or the element of strategic defense of Russia, or Central Command outpost, this is a significant event. So let's see what else was happening during this time. Arestovich was, of course, laying on the sofa. Shelest was probably broadcasting in the stream. What else was happening? Oh, right, some Trump was meeting with Zelenskyy. Somewhere in parallel. Right synchronously as this was happening. And it appears that these taxi drivers are lying to us, right? Again, we, sarcasm here, cannot believe that, but as we're getting the notes that Ukraine actually created a huge provocation against the fact of negotiation itself and Trump's aid in the negotiations. Now, if this is true in this fantastic motion picture, and we're just researching this box of lies of Russian narrative and supposed relations between Trump and Putin, Trump, in this case, would look very discredited gentleman in this situation, who is incapable of conducting quality negotiations free of provocations, given that he probably promised the other side that there will be no attacks on the negotiation process or no significant changes in warfare during the negotiation. So now us, as bystanders who are not inventing anything. We just analyze things and analyze how other people create these stories. So we are trying to understand their thoughts and newspapers and getting other sources, and we see that other people write in black and white that Zelensky continues to work against Trump. And these horrible people are saying that the next step and their key task of his allies, the globalists, according to these publications that we try not to believe to lead Trump to midterm elections in the United States. So he would suffer a political fiasco, and then in 2 years he would leave power. Then the Democrats would be back in power, and again will restart arms and money to Ukraine, US aid restart, and Ukraine will continue doing what they want to do. So you have to trust these sources, that Zelensky is significantly complex person. He feels a tremendous pressure from Trump, but he is actively intriguing against Trump, and he's in a significant company of American and European globalists. So he is not by himself, and that's why he was smiling during the mutual press conference, because he knew that there would be that attack on Russian fortification, on Russian command center, nuclear command center, and that he was smiling because he was aware of that he was playing against these negotiations against Trump. And if to trust these people, yeah, that's what is being said. And ton of sarcasm in Alexei's voice. And the only one question is left, according to them, is how long will Trump tolerate that behavior? Because the problem is not only that Zelensky doesn't want to strike peace with Russia, the problem is that he is actively engaging against Trump. And we're trying not to believe them, but I have to analyze this narrative too. And for those who will be cutting these clips, please take that statement that I am against such a view, and do not blame me of being anybody's agent. But my job is to analyze. Alexei was full of sarcasm, talking, pushing the speech. Okay, Alexei, we do not believe, but we do analyze in this show. So do you think Zelensky could be not aware that there is already an attack underway? Right, of course. He was not aware that Yermak was, for example, stealing money. He was not aware that other close and friends of his and Schiffer and the others were, and of his compatriots were involved in all these machinations. So, of course, he was not aware of any military attack. Why? Because, according to Mikhail Podolyak, his main spokesperson, President is the most informed person in the country. And if you don't believe that, you're a traitor and you need to be sanctioned. So there is one issue here. 2/3 of the sanctioning body somehow turned out to be agents of Moscow, traitors, and were fired from this committee. But that never prevented them from slapping sanctions against other people in the country and other advisors and political figures in Ukraine. Wait a second, Alexei. Let's try to be serious here. Enough clowning around. Well, I'm absolutely serious, Alexander. I have not been that serious since February of 22. Okay, Alexei. Enough laughing here. That's entertaining, though. But I have seen in different Telegram channels, there are different ones. There are Ukrainian, Russian. One could see that they were launches of drones, that they were messages of aerial attack. And people were screaming, that's for you, for Kiev. And now apparently we are seeing a different disposition. Okay, on one hand, Trump is upset, Lavrov is upset. Zelensky is saying, you all are lying, this is not true. But Lavrov said that Russia will review its negotiating position. In which direction? What do you think? They have already mentioned, Alexander, they will pick appropriate targets and they will continue hitting them. As for negotiating position, they'll probably include removal of Zelensky from power as a condition for peace process. They'll just put that fact in front of Trump and say, this is our limited condition, unless they already mentioned that. And we're not going to do anything as long as Zelensky is in power. By the way, according to different sources that we try not to believe, we just analyze here, that Zelensky was exactly pushing for that term. And he will be saying that to Europeans, look, they want to remove me from negotiations because I am standing for Ukraine's interests. I'm the only one who's got Ukraine's interests in heart, not Putin, not Trump. And all these UAVs and other things that are flying, they have no meaning. They want to attack me only because I'm so principally for Ukraine, says Zelensky, right? And he will also play a card probably that all my voice on the tapes is just a provocation, probably AI, and it's Trump and Putin together wishing to remove me from power in Ukraine. So there is that angle that he is trying to hold his chair and stay for as long time as he can. And he's doing it by putting himself as a term in negotiations and also trying to shake the throne of Trump meantime. Well, that's a risky game, Alexei. Yeah, but does he have other options, really? Do you think he invented all that scheme himself? Well, frankly, he's got a ton of advisors. Maybe Yusek Schiffer or somebody else left him that note. Maybe Mindich texted him. Maybe, one of them could have sent an important message to Zelensky. Or maybe he read it in a newspaper as a strategy to read, right? So, look, Alexei, then, and we've been waiting for today to discuss that meeting with you of Trump and Zelensky. And then one needs to understand, I think, an interesting detail here, and Trump was highlighting that detail continuously, that it was done over food, that meeting. They even had a favorite cake of Trump, they had some steaks and all, and Trump was highlighting that all these big generals, they had real good food, good feast at the reception. So when the person is usually being fed, or what's the general purpose of that? To keep him in better spirits, right? So he would be in better mood, everybody is sitting at the table, eating, and usually people are honest when they're eating. It's hard to be lying when you eat. This is subliminal psychological excursion into the story of these business lunches, business dinners, and all. So it draws a very bad picture here. If those DC taxi drivers are correct, then Zelensky visited Trump's home to deceive him. Well, right, these are the cab drivers, right? We're not the ones pushing this agenda, right? Wink. So what conclusions can we make out of this meeting? Well, the cab drivers already are asking questions. How long will Trump tolerate that? Because this is already not a defense of Ukraine. This left this framework and entered the framework of attacking Trump. All right, so about recent statements by Trump, he indeed joked in the negotiation, in the conversation, that it's a good thing he didn't give Ukraine Tomahawk. And now, okay, another thing that's just from me, from Alexey Arestovich. Everything that Trump said before the news of attack on the Russian nuclear command center has no meaning. And that statement when Trump says that good thing we never gave tomahawks to Ukraine, do you think he understands, he already knows where the attack actually happened? Right. Using swear words is one thing, but attacking the home is a completely other. And the negotiation process in the war between Russia and Ukraine is in a very sensitive phase, and these recent actions are significantly complicating the negotiations. So what perspectives do we have at the conclusion of 2025? So Trump needs to, I think, find answers to two things. One of them will be Russia's term of removal of Zelenskyy from Ukraine's power, if we are talking peace. And second, what to do against Zelenskyy if he observes that Zelenskyy is actively attacking Trump's presidency. So these two answers that Trump needs to find, and I think we will be very well positioned to observe it. Okay, Alexey, I will ask another question here. What do you think? Can Trump push Zelenskyy out of power? Well, he has a limited effect on Zelenskyy because Zelenskyy has a big FU gesture in his pocket as EU, who are dreaming to remove Trump and his influence and who are working actively with Zelenskyy to break Trump's politics and probably Trump himself as president. This is a serious trumping card. And Trump is not in a simple situation here. Okay, then all this rhetoric at the finishing press conference, what we saw, the topic of elections was not in the air. Zelenskyy was pushing for a referendum. Well, Trump may agree to elections and referendum, but just play differently. Or perhaps he will use a more rougher scenario to push Zelenskyy out of power, away from presidency in Ukraine. We don't know, Alexander, what will they do now. Now, if this attack on Russian command center was not true, Russians are presenting it as if it was. This is already a factor. It still is moving, capable to move the negotiation framework. So Trump will still have to answer these two questions. And what options does he have? First of all, he cannot attack Kiev, right? He won't. So he doesn't have too many options there. Perhaps the only option is to change the order of things. So maybe run the referendum of trust about Zelenskyy in Ukraine. And it's difficult to object to the results of it, but it might be falsified. Second, he may start or immediately or very soon the program to discredit Zelenskyy. They may leak a lot of tapes, a lot of things, could be personal sanctions against Zelenskyy. He will try to discredit him, perhaps as the leadership figure, and lead Ukraine to the situation when the Ukrainian parliament will need to take side, perhaps start an impeachment procedure against Zelenskyy. But this is a very risky and diluted, kind of very nebulous step. First of all, they'll need some time to make a decision. And when they figure it out, it may take us about a month, maybe sooner, but maybe a little later, but it will take a bit of time. It's not an easy place where Trump is. Basically, what we have now is that the president of an independent country that is totally dependent on the United States has significant levers because of EU and fighting actively against aggressor side represented by Putin and his Russia. And at the same time, he's actively playing against Trump to remove him from the position of power in the United States via breaking his political aspirations. So there will be some actions, sanctions. What they would look like, we don't know yet. I guess the easiest one is to public materials that would discredit President Zelenskyy. And I did like the formulation of one of the Ukrainian speakers that Nabu came to Zelenskyy's TV project crew quarter, the comedy crew of his past life, because they want to blackmail Zelenskyy with something. Oh, so one can ask a question, so there is something to blackmail him with, right? And otherwise you're talking about, yeah, it's okay to blackmail, and it's just inappropriate, right? So it's definitely not going to be boring, and the big question is, what will Trump do? Okay, another aspect I want to add to this topic, and let's scale it a bit. Maybe analyze a few other events. Everybody were expecting Christmas miracle from this meeting in Mar-a-Lago, and at the end we got a diametrically different outcome with a slap on the face. So all of the core of Christmas statements, the only so-called Christmas statement in Ukraine, that Ukrainians and Zelenskyy wish Putin to die. Then we see that he was talking there for about 8 minutes, right? Zelenskyy, that we deserve, we Ukrainians were so and fantastic. There were just candles and empty table and fir trees. But everything looked pretty, everything was shining. It's difficult, though, to tell whether it's an Orthodox, non-Orthodox Christmas, whatever he is celebrating. And the whole road to the very end, he was holding something. You could see him holding himself. Last time I saw him like that was during the comedy club, when he already had a joke and he was holding it before tearing the audience apart. So that's, I guess, his joke. And I think it is a planned action. Well, of course, if the actually attack happened, this was an organized, a very well-planned attack. And if it is well-planned, it is the goal of this action is to remove Trump from power, is to make him lose intermediate elections in the United States and then face impeachment by hostile Congress. And yeah, I guess he is trying to offer Ukrainians that their president is so brave that they can be proud of him. He is intriguing actively, he's attacking actively the president of the United States, if this is all true, if this attack actually happened. So yeah, I think his supporters can be proud of him. Even Netanyahu does not allow himself to behave like that. So when do you think that became obvious? I have a feeling, and the date when it became obvious, maybe it happened earlier, maybe you have a different opinion, Alexey, but this whole style of behavior was officially formulated and presented as a program on the 24th of August, at the day of Ukraine's independence. Back then, Zelenskyy made a statement that we are not a victim, we are a fighter. And since then, I believe, is when things started. How would you estimate this year, victim versus fighter? I think it started earlier. I give you a different option, Alexander. When there was still an election campaign going in the United States, and Zelenskyy with his delegation toured the General Dynamics Scranton munition plants in Pennsylvania. That was viewed as his support to the Democrats, even though the generally military production is usually a essence of the sponsors of the Republican Party, but it was seen as Zelenskyy's encroachment and Democrats' encroachment into that sector to gather some support. Or his scandal in the Oval Office. What do you think about that? So these bells were rung by Zelenskyy and Yermak a long time ago, during the election campaign, even before Trump was ever elected. And some contacts already indicating that Deep State already knows that Ukraine funded some actions against Trump during the election campaign. And why did they want to remove Yermak? Because he was part of that funding. So now Zelensky also got enough support from Brits, from EU, and he's got Starmers and the rest of the coalition and Ursula von der Leyen, and they already have made a decision that they are working against Trump, and they, I guess, gave wings to our little egret who wants to become an eagle, and he is now intriguing actively against Trump and working towards his defeat in midterm elections. So I guess he can be proud of that in his Ukrainian office, and not every president of Ukraine has an influence on the American president and fighting the war with Russia. It's a big deal, I think, and he may end up giving himself an Order of Hero of Ukraine and perhaps also get a Hero of the EU medal. So, okay, Alexei, if Ukraine is a fighter, it seems to be losing quite a lot of fights on the front. Maybe there were attempts to win some media fights, but on the battlefield, the situation for 2025 was rather bad. From whose point of view, Alexander? From the point of view of the objective control, the amount of territory we had at the beginning of this year versus the amount of territory we have at the end of this year. Okay, Alexander, they can think about it differently. The way they can think is that with support of EU, with their money and munitions, yes, Ukraine will be withdrawing. Maybe it'll expedite somewhat, but till Russians take Zaporozhye, while they will spend time taking Kramatorsk and Slavyansk and Izium, that's another year, year and a half. Russians were taking Pokrovsk for over a year. Now take 1 million people worth Zaporozhye and also agglomeration of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. Meantime, Trump will lose maybe everything, and Democrats might come back in the United States, and then Ukraine will get more money again and more munitions. And the most important thing for Zelensky is to stay in power during all the time. Okay, I do understand the logic, thank you. However, there is another story here. People don't really want to join Ukrainian army. Too many people are leaving, running away. There are just holes in the whole military system because of personnel matters. That's true. That's all true. And even in that situation, the final operation on taking Pokrovsk and Kupiansk is still very difficult for Russians. And Ukraine, given the difficult situation on the front, still managed even to push back on Kupiansk a bit and take back 2/3 of it. So that's why they are looking at it quite optimistically. Mobilization, yeah, they will probably tighten more screws and try to gather more people. It is not seen as the significant risk. Okay, Alexei, there is another statement from Cabinet of Ministers that is being discussed in Ukraine that Sviridenko pushed, that in every village there's got to be a drafting commission representative. Well, how is that even going to make anything better when in villages there are almost no men left? Well, right, you're correct on one hand, but, they're seeing it as let's make traps, and the moment you see a man, you capture him, you spring a trap, and then drag him over to the front. They also think that Russia already has significant economic issues. In a year, year and a half, they will likely face even deeper crisis. Meantime, the task of Ukraine is to still hold, just survive that time, while Russia will start falling off the cliff, and then Ukraine somehow will figure out to take these territories back and play it back. From their point of view, that seems to be a reasonable strategy. If you believe this worldview, that position makes sense. Well, but this is not the pro-Ukrainian strategy, Alexei, right? Right, it is not pro-Ukrainian, it is pro-Zelensky strategy. So people who live in Ukraine, who see Ukraine from within, Alexei, how does that strategy support them? Yeah, right, it's horrible for them. But the more I observed how people in other countries view Ukraine, the more I started to think about the outcome of this war. The problem with Ukraine and with the West, with Europe, is that Ukraine needs to fight for another year or two, because it does take time for the West for EU specifically, to build up a few more factories. and try to get the money back from these investments. Well, Iran-Iraq war went for 8 years, right? So why bother? Maybe this war will last longer. But Ukraine may run out of Ukrainians, Alexei. Not really, right, Alexander? What do military personnel complain about? They're saying we have 250,000 people on the front. However, in the back, we got about 1 million people who are prohibited from being drafted, who paid or got some other preferences. Military are saying that you got police. If you bring all the just police officers to the front, technically you have a huge potential for mobilization. Ukraine didn't even tap into the female part of its population. They might. So, yeah, they're still toying with that. They do not feel it too extreme. Zelensky government, that is. And the main purpose for his regime now is not so much as to overcome Putin, but to get rid of Trump. By the actions, that's what seems like. That's one needs to understand. And there are significant terms for the United States. First of all, intermediate elections to Congress, and then how long will Trump have left after that, right? This is their primary target for Zelensky office. Putin is a question number 2. Very important, but number 2. The first one is Trump. Trump is affecting their life much worse than Putin does. Trump is changing the world order, and Zelensky and his government are stakeholders of the previous world order, of the globalist. Okay, Alexei, I have a religious question to you. Do you believe in elections and referendum? Do you think they'll be done together or separately? I'm actually agnostic in this religious matter. I do want to believe in elections, but I have significant doubts. So I'm weak in my spiritual position, I guess. Elections might happen. Zelensky actually aims to win them in Ukraine. And what is he relying upon? He is relying that he may find a way to negotiate with Zelenskyy to not let Zelenskyy run in these elections. And without that figure, that'll be quite easy for him to win. Recently, David Rahamia mentioned that it'll be very difficult for military to participate in elections because they need to leave the army for at least some time to agitate for his name, and then nobody will be on the front. So, oops, we don't have military officers running against Zelensky in this campaign, because who will let them? And again, what will happen sooner, a referendum or elections? A referendum is a great way to prolong the whole process. They may say, yeah, we agree to everything. We don't believe that we attacked Russian residents, Russian command center, but let us be nice and fluffy and let's run a referendum first. This is 60 to 90 days, right? Meantime, there'll be intermediate elections into the Congress of US, right? Midterm elections. So, and then you cannot bring 3 questions to referendum. You only can bring 1 question. You need to organize 2 or 3. And that's maybe a strategy for Zelensky government, just to buy time and see maybe Trump loses midterm elections. So who will be also organizing that referendum, right? And that's why I think Ukraine administration is actively biding time. They're pulling it to make sure they have all the time in the world and everything develops as slow as possible, and they're expecting that maybe at some point they'll get rid of Trump. All right, looking at how Trump is behaving himself with Maduro, I don't think he's too decisive. Side note, this was recorded before Maduro was captured. This was a few days, it was 31st of December. Alexander, Trump, I cannot say he's indecisive. They're intercepting the tankers with oil. They are intercepting the drug trade. It's a big operation. He cannot afford himself to lose in Venezuela, so especially given the midterm elections coming soon. So he's just trying to be more thorough, I think. Ideally, it would be better to do this war outside of Russia-Ukraine conflict, maybe finish the Russia-Ukraine conflict first. But now that he sees that Zelensky is a difficult target and the whole situation might take more time, he might switch and pay more attention to Venezuela in the very near term. All right. More rumors are spread about you by political experts from Moldova, saying that you are somewhat related with Budanov, and under Kushner wing, you are preparing taking over Zelensky's government. Which Kushner? The Trump's relative? Right, that one. And whom did you mention of from Moldova? Sergei Bonar. Oh, I don't even know that commentator. That's an interesting insight that I wanted to bring to your attention, Alexey. All right, dear Sergei, I want to answer your commentary just for you personally. I grew so fond of the life of a simple person that I don't want to topple any government. Now imagine, okay, I somehow get in touch with Kushner and with Budanov and we topple Zelensky. And what next? Well, then let's say you come to power. As who? There is a huge apparatus loyal to Budanov behind him. Hundreds of people who are tied to him by loyalty, money, actions, history, whatever. Budanov has allies, he has an apparatus. What do I bring to the table in that angle? I do not really have a team. Oh, right, people say I have beautiful eyes. The girls fall for them. Okay, if it is a factor in modern politics, then of course I'm ready to do that. I can be like Mikhail Podolyak, the person responding and explaining the actions of the government. I do not appreciate that position. I don't like it. I figured it's not my forte. And then what else do we do with this team? I can name the conditions under which I can come back to Ukraine. If Ukrainian projectivity will start to be shifted to something more reasonable than what's happening now, because observing what's happening there these days, political initiatives, cultural initiatives, I am frankly stunned. I start to understand that the main victim of this war are not territories, but cognitive layer of the whole part of our compatriots. And I have a question. Are we going to try to save that, to treat that, to save Ukraine from themselves? Because even if Sergei Bodnar somehow agrees with Kushner and Budanov and takes helm of Ukraine and tells me that, Alexei, please come back, let's rebuild Ukraine, I still would need these general terms that we are changing the projectivity. Because I will have questions to the next power that comes to power in Ukraine. What will be happening with the drafting commission excesses? Will these people be punished? What will be doing with people who are beating up kids in kindergartens who speak Russian? What will we do with corruption? What will we do with... We've got a lot of problems, right? So I don't see that realistically. I don't see that's happening soon. I'm actually enjoying my present life of outside the processes. For a couple of years, I was lamenting being outside of the political life, but now I kind of grew to like it. You live in a free country, you wake up, you eat oranges, you go do a couple of streams, and why do I need to go somewhere, risk my life, topple things? Well, for motherland. That's a good question, Alexander. For which motherland? The one that's calling upon limiting the rights of Russian-speaking population? The country that drags Orthodox church representatives to court, even when their health is suboptimal? The country that beats up their men who refuse to fight for this regime? The country that abuses its population tax-wise and sanction-wise internally? Such motherland can only get from me some words in my daily streams. The country that will start punishing these figures, the country that will start changing its course, that country may get my support and my participation. Outside of that, no, I'm enjoying where I am. Okay, Alexei, we are streaming live, I understand. Sorry for this personal excursion. And I'm reading the title that Kiev scumbag is trying to interrupt peace negotiations, and he will have to now go into hiding till the end of his miserable life. Oh, Alexander, wait. Did Medvedev just wake up with his Twitter? Yes, exactly. That was the headline from Medvedev's statement. An ex-president of Russia. All right. Yeah, I think people will understand if we see the Oreshnik strike from Moscow on Kiev. All right. If we are concerned about the open hunt season for Zelensky from Russia, this is understandable. They already said that they want Zelensky out of negotiations, and they likely will make his life miserable. They will perhaps try to formally or informally to get rid of him. But Zelensky needed that. I think he was looking for it. You think so? Of course. His logic is very simple, Alexander. See, Russia hates me so much that they want me out of negotiations because they're afraid that I will never give up on Ukraine. And you can see all those people who are dumping materials, compromising materials against me. A, this is fake, and B, if it is not fake, I may be corrupt, but I'm defending Ukraine. And we've seen that in Ukraine. Leaders of public opinion in Ukraine, with blue ticks and all, they're saying that already in Ukraine that, yeah, he may be corrupt, but he's fighting against Putin. This is a public agreement in Ukraine. This is the societal contract, or part of Ukraine thinks this is okay, that this is a normal state of things. And we do not see significant political leaders willing to end this. And we do not know the percentage of people who want to stop the war. Right. Zelensky is saying, Alexei, that 85% want to stop the war. Right. And according to Zelensky, 82% of Ukrainians do not want to leave Donetsk region. And today, after this attack on Russia, after Russia pushed for Zelensky, starting to push for Zelensky out of negotiations, everything changes again. So he needs significant support internally, which he already, I think, has. And he needs significant allies outside, which he has again in the face of EU and globalists. And this can be disarming to Trump and his possible information leaks about Zelensky's corruption. Zelensky is actually, I think, playing rather successfully against Trump. Trump is continuously making the same mistake. He's pushing on Zelensky, getting some peace rhetoric. Yes, of course, let's rerun the elections, let's do all that. And then some action happens that stops all that initiative. So basically, he starts to push on Zelensky and then lets him to reorient, to adjust to this situation. And I think he weakens this effect. This is not how you do it in politics with Zelensky. This is the comedy club for you. Zelensky knows how to play. Okay, but Zelensky did not score to be a champion in comedy club contest. He got to second place, right? Well, he's quite the champion right now. And it's very difficult to see what will Trump do now in this situation, because longer he will push the situation with Ukraine, the more it will affect his midterm elections. Public opinion is that if Russians will start actually hunting down Zelensky, they will create support for him. Problem is that in Moscow, they're not too wise as well. And that's one of their major problems in Moscow. They might start hunting Zelensky now. And this will only affect his ratings to grow higher. Okay, Alexei, let's say I'm not going to disclose political figures who are talking to me, who are supporting some information, but they're saying that Americans were informed that all the guarantees of untouchability for Zelensky were annulled. So Russia is already removing all the stop flags. Right, that's exactly what I'm saying, Alexander. Russians who are not too smart, the Putin's cabinet is not a smart one, they might start hunting Zelensky. Well, what happens if they do succeed? It's not an easy thing. He has options to hide, right? His rating will go to 165% after that. A lot of patriots in Ukraine will go supporting him. And then there'll be a story with monuments and the martyr and all that, right? Right, Alexander. So they'll post a question in Ukraine Are you for Putin and Medvedev who want to kill Zelensky, or are you for Zelensky? So Zelensky, playing on the line of certain personal risk, he provided for a new wave of personal support in Ukraine and in the world. His position is good. Now, okay, what Trump would do? He can publish some horrible, compromising stuff, right? Maybe direct recording of Zelensky where he says that Ukrainian people use expletives, what Arestovich was using about the Ukrainian people, and for which I apologize, but yeah, it was very expressive. So Zelensky will say, first of all, claim that this is AI editing, and that, look, I'm fighting for Ukraine so much that all they are trying to remove me. This was a very bright move from Zelensky, and it's much more difficult for Trump to do anything when he thought that he already got Zelensky's support, and he announced that after meeting in Mar-a-Lago, or pre-Mar-a-Lago, that we're almost in agreement on everything. So this is a very talented move on Zelensky's behalf. And now I think Putin's cabinet will remove personal guarantees from Zelensky's figure, and that will only spike his rating in Ukraine, because you're either for Putin or being against Zelensky, that means for Putin, or you're for Zelensky. Now, again, you cannot keep raising stakes because you might eventually hit the ceiling, but for now he still has ceiling. But temporarily, that is a significant move. And the life is complex. China is already starting training exercises near Taiwan. Russia mentioned that they will support China, if anything, and this may be their answer to Venezuela conflict. And Zelensky might find an opportunity to stay on his throne for a couple more years, and then maybe Trump will, with his cohorts, will not get reelected. So without any false advertising, this is a significant move on Zelensky's behalf. Yes, he made a strong move. Now, if Russians were more keen politicians rather than a bear in a china shop, they would have said, well, this probably is a provocation of some nationalist, and President Zelensky remains a legitimate person for these elections, and that would take away this trump card from Zelensky's fold. Okay, Alexey, let's look at Russians for a sec. They, I think, did that for a while. In Moscow, they're getting generals and lieutenants blown up. There are attempts at lives of known people, some other explosions happening. They never made it too loud. They just said, oh, those are Islamists and Crocus and the like. So there is usually a trace, but they're not really pushing for tracking it. Alexander, Russians in their current state, they are very straightforward and they're easy to manipulate. Their object number 1 was attacked, and they're already prepping Oreshnik as a vengeance weapon. This is not elegant politics. They are now going to get some pushback from Trump. They're already putting Trump in a difficult position by their action. We understand their logic too, of course. They're saying, Trump, solve this problem with Zelensky. This is your customer. This is a proxy war. Yeah, you inherited him from Biden and the globalists, but solve this problem for us, and then we can continue moving forward with China, Taiwan, and the rest. If you don't, then what can you solve? I'm quite sure Putin called Trump and basically said, this is your responsibility. If you don't want Taiwan to suffer for your actions around Venezuela, do something with Zelensky. This is your proxy war. This is your proxy power. He is still sitting on your weapons and on your money in Ukraine. And if you cannot topple Zelensky, what else can you do in this world, Donald? And that's it. That's very understandable, but primitive logic. Wait, Alexey. This is your argument, and I want to provide you a counter-argument here. I know that I'm playing for Russians here. No, it's okay, Alexander. I appreciate where you actually engage like this. All right, okay, I just want to understand. You, for example, did believe that Washington cab drivers, right? Let's believe Zelensky for a sec. What if there was no attack? right? Let's believe Zelensky and say they usually launched UAVs, they didn't fly anywhere or flew somewhere, but all got shot down. Nothing major happened. Now let's look at this angle. They took off. The Russians see that this is negotiations. They observe the negotiations, and during the conversation of Zelensky and Trump, they say, well, one of our significant command outposts was attacked. Trump is shocked. He says he did not know. So, an important thing, if this indeed is a lie, Trump was not aware of that. And it is an interesting discreditation move, and I think this is a little more elegant. I apologize for Medvedev's Twitter here with a guarantee of security for Zelensky and all denunciation. Now, Zelensky's guarantees are removed, so he may forget about visiting the front and visiting his fighters at the front that is crumbling, that is suffering, that is facing difficult times. You may lose control over your army. You do not have that much influence. You are not strong. You cannot take pictures near Kupiansk Stela because your security guarantees are removed. He will be in Kiev and in Europe. He'll be a European president of Ukraine, but not the Ukrainian president of Ukraine. So one can play this angle here. Wait, Alexander, this logic only works on the level of Trump to persuade him to make certain actions. Okay, let's imagine there was no attack. And Russian leadership still says, we need to come to an agreement. Zelensky doesn't want to move, let's remove him. Let's create a situation where we need to remove Zelensky and put the conditions that his participation would be intolerable. But this all is broken by one simple thing, that Americans can't figure out whether attack happened or not. With all the surveillance, all the satellite imagery and all, Americans will know whether this attack happened. And if you see that the situation actually happened, while Russian side is lying about it, or they didn't fly and Russia is lying, that puts Putin in a bad light. Putin understands that, I think. Okay. I think that spirit of anchorage, Alexei, no, it's not about the spirit of anchorage. Negotiations are happening. The negotiation process is happening. They do communicate. They are figuring out. Remember how long it took Putin and Trump to talk over the phone. And these days they have 2 conversations a week. So the process is happening. And I don't see them riding this situation on a simple act of lie. So most likely, we do not have full confirmation, but if you analyze the situation, it seems that it is most likely Zelensky's move. Russians, I don't see them lying in this way. America has satellites, they have agents, they can easily track whether this thing happened. And this is a very important command outpost. Of course, it is being observed. I think they are tracking the spike in communications. They might even be able to decipher the communications. But, of course, that can be presented as the radio game, but that's not how it works. Putin may be a scumbag, but I don't see him lying that he was attacked when your other party can actually check whether you were attacked. And right, this will also lead you to being weak, to present certain weakness to your own. And in Russia, you have to be strong, right? Whom can you defend, like Stalin said, if you cannot defend yourself? Russia has that somewhat of a thuggish line of thought in the leadership. Why is he talking about that? Because his oligarchs, born in from the 1990s actions, they are asking him questions. Like back in the 90s, you got a Molotov cocktail thrown in your restaurant, you got to respond to that, right? So they're very often working in this logic, not in political logic. If they were more in the Byzantine style of politics, as they like to present themselves, they would say differently. They would say that Zelensky's nationalists are making mistakes. They don't understand what they're doing. And listen, this means that America should limit, and Europe should limit, attacking capabilities for Ukraine because it cannot control what they have. And Zelenskyy remains a legitimate president, and we can talk to him. So such a Judas kiss, Alexey, right? Right. But they cannot do that. They are working in a more thuggish logic in this case. Okay, I'll hold on to your thought here. Then why is Trump saying that he needs strong Ukraine? Oh, he didn't say strong Ukraine. Right. He said flourishing Ukraine. Flourishing. So everybody was laughing at this here, but let's look at the statement as a political maneuver from Machiavellian logic. Can some other leader, not Putin, say that the position of Russia on the western borders directly depends upon the situation and the life of its neighbors? And we're building individual relations with each neighbor separately. And brotherly Ukraine, and again, that's not Putin, that's some other leader, let's say, who is saying that Ukraine went through difficult times of the war of 2014, of that special military operation that Russia conducted against it. We need to make sure that social and economic situation in Ukraine are such that they would not lead the population to go destitute, that will let people grow and flourish, so that would not lead to more explosions of a social style in Ukraine. So the country would continue going in a steady way of developed countries. So, for example, make sure that Ukraine has cheap electricity as the basis for its flourishing. Can that leader hypothetically say that? Of course he can. Most likely he would and could. But here one needs to pay attention to a very irregular behavior of Russian politics. They are the hostages of their own system. And Machiavelli said that, and Lenin repeated that external politics is a continuation of internal politics. Because Russia is not treacherous enough to be a Byzantine in external relations. But when they're being attacked with UAVs on the central command outpost, then their thuggish logic turns on. And they're generally prone to being thuggish. So first, they need to respond for such attack. Second, Trump needs to also present his manhood, that he's capable of stopping all this stuff and is not just a toy, a parlor toy for Zelenskyy and Europe. And that's why from the thuggish point of view, they are presenting it, they're playing their card they usually know how to play. End of the first hour.